All right, welcome to Total FIFA Career Mode. We're going to do a Pints and Punditry segment today where we are going to preview the Champions League draw that's coming up here in a couple of hours. And there's so many possibilities here that I just want to talk about all these different options, all these different possibilities. You can see we've got the different pots up on the screen here. I want to go ahead and put the link to this on Twitter. Bear with me for a second so everybody knows to follow. All right, so Champions League coming up. Always exciting, one of the biggest times in Europe. And, I don't usually get too hung up on the draws when it comes to some of the domestic cups, the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, because, you're really going to have to beat everybody or beat some good teams to get there. And it really only, anyway, it really only matters if you are, trying to advance from the third to the fourth round, and if that's really your ceiling there. But in the Champions League, so much of the potential of getting out of the group stage depends on this draw, and it feels like this year more than ever, probably because there's been so many transfers on the transfer market, and so many clubs are in a significantly better situation than they were last year, or a significantly worse situation than they were last year, and so the fortunes of some of these clubs have really changed, and that makes for some really interesting potential draws here. And what jumps out at me first and foremost, you got to look at pot one, right? So these are all your champions of all your leagues around Europe, and so these are most of the big boys, right? You got Manchester City, Bayern, PSG, Barcelona, right? So these are your big boys. Somebody's going to get very lucky getting Feyenoord as the top team in their group, and that's nothing against Feyenoord; they're a good club. But winning the Dutch league is not the same as drawing Bayern Munich or drawing Manchester City. It's not even close. And that's sort of the interesting part here is the massive disparity between getting the best team from pot one in your group versus the worst team from pot one in your group, right? It's just a massive disparity. If you're a club on the fringe, right? Let's pick PSV down in pot three, right? So they're going to get probably two pretty good teams in a group, and they're looking, in theory, they should be the third best team in a group, right? Everybody in pot three should be the third best team in their group. In theory, it's not going to work out like that, but that's the mentality here, right? You've got an A-level team, a B-level team, a C-level team, and a D-level team. And it doesn't always work out that way. But if you're somebody like PSV, right, good club, and they are, they have a chance to advance out of the group stage. And for a club like that, advancing out of the group stage versus not is massive financially. There's a massive impact for them on the money that comes from this, from the TV revenue. So whether or not they advance out of the group stage can be the difference between keeping a player or not, or signing new players, or those sorts of things. So there are massive financial implications here. And if you look at the possibilities here, there is a massive difference between if they draw Manchester City and Real Madrid as the 1 and 2 in their group versus if they get they can't get Feyenoord. Maybe they weren't the best example. Use Shakhtar or use RB Salzburg. But if they get Benfica instead, right? Let's use them as the other example. And they get Atletico Madrid, or they get RB Leipzig as the pot two team instead of Manchester United or instead of Inter Milan, who was in the Champions League final last year for crying out loud, or Real Madrid, right, or Arsenal, who's very, very good. And so there's just such a massive discrepancy between the best teams in pot one and these other two that are obviously easier draws. And I understand why they break them up like this, right? They put all the champions in one pot, but man, being champion of the Premier League is not the same as being champions of the Eredivisie, right? or drawing Sevilla, who is in that pot because they're the Europa League champions. Let's talk about that for a second, right? Sevilla is in that pot, right? So you've got Sevilla, Benfica, and Feyenoord, right? So you've got a 3 out of 8 chance of getting a significantly easier draw than if you get Man City, Barcelona, Napoli, Bayern, or PSG. And if we're ranking them, the clubs you don't want are probably Man City, Bayern, Barcelona, PSG, Napoli, Feyenoord, Benfica, Sevilla. Would that be the order? Hop in the comments and tell me if you have a different order there. I'd love to get your opinion. And while we're at it, make sure you subscribe to us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at TotalFIFACM and subscribe to the channel if you don't already. But there's those 5, right? And you could argue that it's City. You could argue it's City and then everybody else. You could argue it's City, Bayern, Barcelona, and then there's a step down for PSG and Napoli. I think that's actually a fair assessment. And then you've got a third tier, which is Sevilla, Benfica, and Feyenoord, right? But if you are, let's look down at pot 4. You're a club like Newcastle, right? Who got in and is a phenomenally better team than anybody else in pot 4, right? So they've got a chance to win, or not to maybe win a group depending on who's in it, but certainly advance out of the group stage as a pot 4 team. But it very much depends on who's in there. So if they get a really unlucky draw and get City, Atletico Madrid, and AC Milan, right? And Newcastle. That would be a group of death, right? And there's always one. And sometimes there's more than one, but there's always one. That would be impossible, right? 2 teams are coming out of it, but that would be really unfortunate for Newcastle in their return to European football. But if they got Feyenoord, Porto, Shakhtar, they're winning that group, right? They're going to win that group, right? So they could come in anywhere from 1st to 4th depending on who is in this draw. So there's so many possibilities. You hope that your pot 3, if you're one of the big clubs, you hope your pot 3 and 4 teams are easier targets, right? You don't want to get a Newcastle. You don't want to get even somebody like Celtic. Having to go to Celtic is tough, right? You should beat them. If you are Manchester City, if you are Bayern, you should knock off Celtic, no problem. But having to go play at Celtic is no easy task, compared to playing Young Boys, right? Or playing even Union Berlin would be an easier target for them. It's just so many possibilities. Now, you have to remember, you can't have clubs from the same country in the same group, right? And I love that. I love that that's a possibility, that they rule that out, because you get all these matchups. And so you've seen if you look at somebody like Manchester City, they can't get Manchester United, they can't get Arsenal, and they can't get Newcastle, right? So they can get anybody from pot 3. Bayern can't get Dortmund, can't get Union Berlin. I think that's all. Is that all of our German teams? That's all of our German teams. You'll look at a club like AC Milan. They've got a real possibility. They are definitely, especially with the way they're playing right now, they are definitely the class of pot 3. So one of these pot 1 teams is going to have a really tough go because they're going to get AC Milan. Now, if it's somebody from that bottom group, right? If it's Feyenoord, if it's Benfica, if it's Sevilla, they might be in trouble, because I would put AC Milan ahead of any of those clubs. It can't be Napoli. Now, if it's City, Bayern, PSG, or Barcelona, that's a tough third team. You're going to look at, well, what are some of the combinations here? We could have Bayern, Real Madrid, AC Milan. Whew, that'd be a fun group, right? We could have Manchester City, Dortmund, AC Milan. That'd be a fun one. Dortmund would be in trouble. Borussia Dortmund would be in a lot of trouble if they drew a group like that, right? Borussia Dortmund is not off to a great start this year. If you're looking at pot 2, they're one of the weaker options. RB Leipzig is off to a better start. They're probably a better team right now, I think. Dortmund might be better than Porto there. but there's they're not in a great place right now. And let's see, is that Porto? That is Porto, right? Yeah, that's Porto. I'm making sure I got all these logos right. Dortmund is not a strong club right now. They're not at their peak. So, if you're one of these top teams and you're looking at who you want from pot two, you'll take Dortmund any day over Real Madrid, over Arsenal, probably over Manchester United, probably over Inter, Atletico Madrid, Leipzig. I mean, they're in that range, but going to Borussia Dortmund is always tough because of the atmosphere at that stadium. But the club itself is just not that great right now. They've lost so much talent over the past few years. They have not replaced it the way they normally do, so they're down, right? And they're a club. They're a good example of a club that was a pot two club last year. They almost won the Bundesliga, right? But they lost Jude Bellingham, and that's massive. That's massive for them. That takes them down a whole level. If they end up with AC Milan in their pot, I don't know that they beat them. I don't know that they come out of that. If it's one of the big pots, one of the big clubs in pot one, City, Bayern, PSG, Barcelona, even Napoli. Well, they can't be in with Bayern, but if it's one of the other four and it's AC Milan and they can't be in with Napoli, see, it's so complicated. I love it. So you could have City, PSG, or Barcelona, one of those three, Dortmund, and possibly AC Milan in a group. Dortmund's in trouble if that happens. So you've got some of these real possibilities here that could make for some fascinating storylines and some real outcomes here. You sort of look at these and you say, okay, where are the stumbling blocks, right, for big clubs? So somebody that isn't Manchester City is getting Arsenal in their group as a second group. And Arsenal is better than half of the clubs in pot one right now. They're better than Sevilla. They're better than Feyenoord. They're better than Benfica. Probably better than Napoli. They're probably better than PSG at this point. PSG is, just not what they once were, although at least they have Kylian Mbappe back. But, so if you're Bayern, if you're PSG, if you're Barcelona, if you're Napoli, you really don't want Arsenal in that group, and none of them do. Everybody but City could have them, but those are clubs that are looking for an easier target in pot two. Same thing with Real Madrid. Real Madrid would be a hell of a draw for pot two, and this sort of thing happens every year because every year one of Barcelona or Real Madrid ends up in pot two, right? They can't both win La Liga, so this happens every year, but it makes for really fascinating storylines, and that's what we're all about here. That's what this is all about, because we don't have a game for a little while, so all this is the draw, but it's fun. This is fun. This is what it's all about. I'll be on the edge of my seat watching this in a couple hours. Who gets the short straw and gets in pot two? If you look at it in tiers, we got Madrid and Arsenal probably as the top two. I think Madrid has higher top tier talent than Arsenal, although it's close. But they're one injury away from some real issues, especially on that back line, and with Vinicius Jr. out for a month, and it's a good thing Jude Bellingham is playing out of his mind, or else they'd be in trouble. But those two are probably the top two in that pot, and then you've got United, Inter, Atletico Madrid. They're all probably about the same level. RB Leipzig might be in that level. They're playing real. They're a good club. They're a good club this year. So they could be trouble. And then it's I think Dortmund and Porto beneath them. But that whole pot two that's probably the most even pot. There's nobody really in pot two that jumps out as like, this is the club we don't want. Real Madrid and Arsenal would be a worse draw for most clubs than Porto or Dortmund, but I don't think it's a massive gap. Not like in pot one and not like in pot three where I think AC Milan just jumps out at you as the club nobody wants. In pot 3 and 4, there is one club that nobody wants. In pot 3, it's AC Milan. In pot 4, it's Newcastle United. And those are the draws that all these big clubs, City and Bayern and PSG and Barcelona and Napoli, they're sitting there saying, and even to a certain extent, Real Madrid, Arsenal, the clubs that really have a shot to win this thing. Right? Those are probably the clubs that have a shot to win this thing. City, Bayern, PSG, Barcelona, maybe Napoli, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Those are the clubs that probably have a chance to win, and I don't think United's quite there. I don't think Inter Milan is quite there, although they made the final last year, so anything can happen. But they're all looking to say, okay, who do we not want in pot 3 and pot 4? AC Milan in pot 3, Newcastle in pot 4. Those are the landmines, right? Those are the landmines, which helps the Italian teams and the English teams, right? Because Napoli cannot get AC Milan in their group. So they're probably not getting anybody in pot 3 that they can't handle. And Man City, and also to the same effect, United and Arsenal, don't have to worry about pot 4 really, because they can't get Newcastle, right? So they're going to get Real Sociedad, or they're going to get Young Boys, or they're going to get Celtic, or one of these other clubs. So they should get somebody they can handle without a problem there. It's really the teams from Germany and Spain and France that have to worry about some sort of group of death. That's who could get one of AC Milan or Newcastle, or God help them if they get both, right? So we could theoretically see a group that is completely flipped. Newcastle in pot 4, AC Milan in pot 3. Let's see, that's England, that's Italy. So let's get a German team, Dortmund, and then Feyenoord, right? So it's actually, if you made a depth chart out of that group, it would be completely flipped. Newcastle's probably the best team. AC Milan's probably second. Those could go either way. Dortmund would be the third best team. Feyenoord would be the fourth best team. That's a possibility. So you could have a group that is completely ass backwards, which would be, I don't even know what that would be, other than fun to watch and sort of bizarre, but interesting nonetheless. So I love that sort of stuff. I love when that happens. It probably won't happen that way, but there's just so many possibilities here for unique competitions and unique combinations of clubs. So I can't wait for this, and I'll be watching. Maybe we'll do a recap live stream tonight or this afternoon if I have time. To go over the results because it's so many fascinating possibilities. The last thing I want to talk about is do not, and I made a video about this yesterday, when your club gets a tough draw, right? Because somebody's got to. Somebody's getting AC Milan, somebody's getting Newcastle. Do not start chiming in with the conspiracy theories. Do not start saying it's rigged. Do not start saying it's fixed. Nobody's out to get your club. I hate this so much. I'm so tired of it. It happened this weekend with the Liverpool fans who were up in arms about Virgil van Dijk's straight red card. And I'm not getting into whether or not it was the right call or not. I made a video yesterday, and if you don't already follow us, go ahead and follow us on Twitter and hit the subscribe button for me. I did a video yesterday, reiterating this point. The leagues are not out to get you. The refs are not out to get you. If you're a big club, why would anybody want to screw you, right? The Champions League and UEFA makes more money when the big clubs are in the final, right? Man City and Inter was a pretty good final, right? But they would rather have had Real Madrid in there or Barcelona than Inter. They always do better when it's a club with a strong following and a strong fan base. They don't, as much fun as it is when there's an upstart who makes a run, they don't want them to make a run all the way, right? I guarantee you, UEFA was not thrilled when Ajax made it as far as they made it a few years ago. Because the money's just not there. The fan base isn't there. The neutrals aren't going to get excited for that, right? Manchester City, you don't have to be a fan of them to have watched that. A lot of people hate watched that match. The Champions League final this year just because of the hatred for City, and that's fine because they watched, right? So the money was there, the revenue was there. That's all UEFA cares about. So why would they be out to get your club? They're not going to stack it against, Bayern on purpose or stack it against Manchester United on purpose or Arsenal, but they're not. Do you know how much UEFA would love to have Manchester United in a Champions League final, right? If anything, they should be stacking it in your favor. Right? So, and they're not doing that. I don't buy any of those conspiracy theories. So if your takeaway after this draw happens today is, oh, it's fixed, UEFA's corrupt. Listen, UEFA is corrupt for a lot of reasons. This ain't one of them. All right, it's not because they're fixing this draw that they're doing right in front of you on live TV. No one's good enough to pull that off. So I don't buy any of that. So just spare me those comments after the fact, because I just don't have any time for them. You sound uneducated. You're not a good fan if that's your takeaway. There are plenty of storylines, right? There are so many storylines here. I'm fired up. I'm excited. I can't wait for Champions League football to start again. And so I'm getting excited about the draw because it's all we got, right? It's all we got for now. So I would love to hear what you're hoping for. If you see this sometime now, between now and the draw, go ahead and hit those comments for me, and then maybe we'll do another live stream this afternoon or this evening to recap how they turned out and see if any of these wacky combinations came to fruition. So thanks for joining us. This is Pints and Punditry here on Total FIFA Career Mode. Enjoy the day, enjoy the Champions League draw, and we'll come back and do this